Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 35 and 36. So I'll mention once again, I do have YouTube channel membership and Patreon available if you'd like to help support the channel. And if you come in at the higher tier, you'll gain early access to videos in this series. But we'll jump in here, and this is, like I said, definitely the point where the book gets quite action-centric. We really move quite quickly between like the key scenes. As evidenced by the fact that we ended the last chapter with General Sung giving them the key information about the eclipse. That might be a good day to try and get into the palace to get Susu out. And within these two chapters, we're basically right up to the point where the eclipse is like about to happen. So highlights how quickly we begin to move at this point. We don't spend multiple chapters on the kind of how we approach getting there, actually doing it and then getting there. It's just like, no, along the way, here's a quick recap of what happened, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, we start 35 with the idea that General Sung, like he said when he moved off, he would try his best to sort of distract and basically get some of the attention on him to bring the attention away from anyone else. So yeah, they get a pretty decent path back out into the lower ring. And yeah, because of course again it's Jin, Xuan, and 7 girls that they kind of got out from the kind of Judy program. So the details we get on these 7 are that 4 of them want to do everything they can to get back to their families. So they'll kind of risk it all to make it back to them. That's how they're going to do that. The other 3 have nowhere to go. So Jin basically makes the decision at this point, like, okay, I'll introduce these 3 to Mama Wen. She will take them in. She could use the extra hands. And that's kind of the best I can do for now. That, like, if I'm going to be busy doing all this stuff, these 3 can at least be kind of safe over there, and they get the kind of help that they need as well. Interesting, yet we get Mama Wen immediately welcomes them in with no hesitation. They do introduce the oldest girl here, whose name is revealed to be Kai, or Sai, C-A-I, which interestingly is the same name as, this is the cabbage merchant's actual name, which we got relatively recently. This is a weird thing that's happening with the novels and some of the publication stuff these days, is that some of the extra names that are being used in the novels are names that we kind of get from some of the other material. Like, I think there's a Biyu from earlier on in the book. Biyu, of course, is the kind of quote-unquote villain character from Suki Alone. And I think The Reckoning of Roku had a bunch of these situations as well, where there were references to other RPG characters, not from the Roku era, but like other eras. And it was kind of like, they're definitely making decent use of some of these names that they kind of come up with here. But anyway, yeah, so we have Sai goes directly to Baby Ming and starts playing with her, so they're going to work out, I think, quite well over there. Mama Wen thanks Jin for her help, but she does say, I'm so sorry about your gong gong, of course. But yeah, we're moving pretty quickly at this point, and we kind of move on. Just before we move on, we do get this nice scene where she's kind of back at her kind of apartment, basically, but now it's obviously minus Gong Gong, but now she has Smellerbee, Longshot, and Xuan kind of staying with her like a lot of the time. And yet their presence in my home makes me feel a little less alone. So she has this kind of friend group now, but she has lost her grandfather. So that's the situation there. So yeah, this is where they then begin to do sort of like scouting to kind of figure out, okay, how exactly are we going to do this? It's noted that the Silver Fangs have disbanded, so the deliveries are paused. So what Jin does is she begins to take on more calligraphy commissions. And this eventually leads to one pronouncement that she has to do come across her desk, and that is the pronouncement that Judy is now the supreme administrator of Ba Sing Se. Now, this is an interesting one because this detail, we knew about this detail before, but this detail comes solely from the short story Going Home Again, which I've referenced a few times. This is where we heard about this for the very first time, and it's in this book, it's the only clear-cut reference to Going Home Again that we get in this book, because as we'll see, the other situation where, of course, Jin meets Lee again has not been referenced. And at this point in the book, we're basically past this point, because again, we're very, very close to the eclipse happening. So that's mid-book 3, whereas this, of course, is pre-book 3, this scene. So very clearly, this is the point where you realize, okay, they're not going to directly reference this scene. Now, there's a bunch of multiple day time skips that have happened in or around this kind of section here, as they're doing a lot of this scouting and stuff like that. But you don't really get much impression that it kind of has happened, or really almost like could have happened. And we'll see as we go forward, there are references that Jin makes to the date with Lee, and they're very lacking in any sort of detail suggesting that she met Lee somewhat recently again after that date. So, a weird situation when it comes to going home again, where they clearly reference it, but otherwise don't, in terms of the obvious kind of situation here. So, interesting there. So, we then get Jin's perspective on, like, okay, even if she goes to and finds Susu, will she be able to break through the brainwashing? This is what she's kind of thinking about now. And she's like, I'm certain that she will come to remember me. Because Smellerbee and Longshot explained that it was their bond with Jet, their shared memories, that caused him to snap free of the Dai Li influence. So she knows she really has to kind of lay it on kind of thick, really get into the emotion of Susu's life and the connection with Jin and her family, and she should be able to kind of break through. She touched on that before, but it didn't seem to work, but now she knows she needs to kind of really hit it home hard. So that's her approach going forward. We get Xuan and Jin spending a lot of time kind of monitoring the Dai Li, watching their mannerisms, because the plan, of course, is to basically dress up as Dai Li agents and kind of just walk into the palace. We get some of the exact specifics of that, so they're going to learn their mannerisms. Xuan has a map of the palace that he was able to procure using some of the contacts that they have. Xuan is also able to make contact with Patron Wu, who gets them replicas of the Dai Li tokens to make their way through the various rings and stuff like that, the checkpoints. And yeah, together Jin and Xuan practice the Dai Li kind of fighting techniques. So the big one that they highlight here is, of course, pulling basically rock beads out of the ground or whatever, and then forming them into different shapes and, you know, wrapping them around people's faces like gags. The other one is the rock glove technique. And they describe that Xuan is really good at kind of both of these things. Jin right now can only manage the rock bead technique, just because the glove requires that little bit of extra connection that he has, because he's a very detail-orientated earthbender. She doesn't quite have that connection, like that rock hand is an extension of herself as another hand type situation. So there's that. We then just address the idea that they're beginning to get closer and closer. They talk a lot more. They talk about their personal lives a bit more. So she learns about, you know, his sisters, Layla and Aisha, of course. We learn that Layla is going to take over Huyuan Apothecary one day, and that he's all about, you know, protecting his family. That's why he's doing what he's doing. So Jin realizes that they're motivated by kind of very similar things, and we'll see this kind of covered a bit more in the next chapter as well. So they are getting closer, of course. The monorails then resume, and this allows them to, of course, get closer and closer to the palace, of course. We once again note the kind of weirdness of, like, there's Fire Nation soldiers kind of all over the place. It's odd, you know, how somewhat normal things are, but there just happens to also be, like, Fire Nation guards and soldiers around the place, highlighting who is actually in charge. We address the idea that Smellerbee and Longshot are not going to go with them on this mission, because they're so used to, I suppose, being freedom fighters and stuff like that. They can't, you know, take on different identities that clearly. Whereas Xuan and Jin can act the way that's required to do a lot of this stuff, whereas they can't quite bring themselves to kind of go that far. But yeah, then we get the idea. The day arrives, too fast yet not fast enough. I don't feel quite prepared, but I know I can't wait. I have to get Susu out of there before it's too late, and she forgets us forever. So that's the end of chapter 35. Straight into 36, and it's just like boom, boom, boom. we enter the palace through one of the side gates, and we immediately just address that. Okay, we're not spending multiple chapters on the careful infiltration. They're just kind of highlighting that at this point they know what they're doing, so they make their way in, and what they instead inform us about is like, okay, what do they establish themselves as doing kind of within the palace? Jin kind of immediately is like, I'm a laundry worker now, and this allows me to kind of move around certain parts of the palace with relative ease, and this also allows her to get Dai Li uniforms that will fit herself and Xuan perfectly effectively. Xuan is in the kitchens. He used Silver Fang connections to get kind of a role in there, as well as the tokens, of course, that they had from before, also allowing them to get in. And again, they just highlight the idea that they use a lot of this time here over the coming days to scout around the place. So Jin is doing what she can, within the palace. Xuan is scouting around kind of, outside, trying to figure out kind of a lot of stuff. She notes, though, how impressive it is. Again, we've had this established, I think, a few times in the book. She always notes how interesting it is that he's easily able to slip into various different roles depending on the people that he's interacting with. He changes his posture, his way of speaking, so that he fits in wherever he is. And interestingly, they sort of fall into this situation of, hey, how could we actually talk to each other and, maintain proper cover? And they inadvertently fall into this thing of like everyone around them who sees them talking to each other thinks that they're in a relationship, and it's kind of a little bit secret. And so a lot of the other kind of like laundry kind of girls and ladies are just kind of like, oh, spending a lot of time together. And he again immediately is like, yeah, let's roll with this, and kind of puts his arm around her. She's quite nervous, but she is kind of forced to play along with it, which is a kind of fun situation. Again, we bring up the idea that Lee, of course, had the whole "she's not my girlfriend," gets very annoyed, whereas Xuan is much more comfortable with this kind of insinuation kind of happening here. So yeah, they learn a few things. The administrators are on the 3rd level of the West Wing. It's mostly Fire Nation soldiers kind of patrolling around there. They're kind of figuring out, okay, how do we find out which room like she's going to be in? We highlight that Longshot and Smellerbee are going to be like as close as possible on the outside, kind of like to help them with the escape. They're going to look for like the signal to help them get out. And yeah, this is where Jin begins to figure out some stuff about the Judies. She spots them from a distance. There are multiple of them. It's not just that our main Judy became the individual Supreme Bureaucratic Administrator. There is a group of them, the kind of high-ranking Judies, that are all Supreme Bureaucratic Administrators. Because again, they need multiple of them because the brainwashing doesn't like fully last and stuff like that. So we basically get the reveal that, yeah, Susu is one of these Supreme Bureaucratic Administrators. That's why she's not only in the palace, but in the kind of more high security section of the palace. That it's going to make it even more tricky, of course. So yeah, and we just continue some of the setup stuff here of like Xuan manages to actually grab the Dai Li's special rock beads, and because it's made of more high quality rock, it's able for Jin to kind of advance her bending all the more as she practices on them. So she's going to be kind of prepared for a little bit of combat when it kind of comes up here. We do address that she begins to kind of take on the kind of secret identities that they have of like when she goes off to do other stuff, she's like, oh yeah, I'm doing it to go off and meet my boyfriend. She doesn't like lying to them, but it's fine. And we just get that kind of note of like she realizes, oh yeah, I'm talking to people who kind of live a better life than I do. Like they work in the palace, but it is a much more comfortable life than living in poverty in the lower ring. It's an interesting one. That they don't lose sight of that Jin comes from the lower ring, and here she is with people who work in the upper ring in the palace. Like there is that kind of gulf in class here. Then finally, this is where we get the idea that we get full confirmation Susu is actually here. Jin notes that she actually did see her today, and like she considers like, oh, I could I have walked up to her, tried to talk to her, but no, they have to time this kind of correctly or it'll all fall apart. What she then gets to talking about kind of is almost the idea of, am I risking too much, not only for myself, but for like everyone else? Am I asking too much of Schwen, Smellerby, and Longshot just for Susu? She's to herself kind of thinking, you know, why is he so dedicated to effectively just my cause? Why is he doing this? And so eventually she kind of just asks this, am I being selfish, putting you and the others at risk just for Susu? And he says, here's the reveal for him. Why is he doing this? I never told you why it matters so much to me, but it's my father. He went to learn from the Herbalist Institute near Taku with the hopes of finding a cure. There was a special type of fever that he noticed was common among the Western refugees. He thought that the greenhouse there might have a particular plant that could have been brought back to the city and cultivated here. His caravan was targeted and he was killed by the Fire Nation. And it's this emotional moment. She puts his hand on his, and he continues, when he left, he told me I had to take care of my sisters, just like my sisters should protect me. When you talk about Susu, that's what I'm reminded of. If that happened to one of my sisters, I would do anything to get them back. That's why I have to help you. So that's kind of where we're kind of ending the chapter. Basically here, she thanks him. They have to be ready. The time General Sung told us about is close. And they kind of note that I think we have all the information that we need. We basically know where the main Judies are. I've seen Susu, so she's going to be basically over here. We just have to get the timing and the exact plan that we're going to execute down right, because the eclipse is about to happen very, very soon. So, and yeah, that's basically what happens in the next chapter. We're about to jump into the eclipse happening, highlighting that we're all the way into book 3 at this point, like halfway through it. So very interesting on the continuity kind of front here. So yeah, more of a chapters to kind of put the pieces into the right position here, kind of get us through a bunch of the kind of gap days but leading up to the eclipse. But there is some nice stuff in here, like just getting that characterization kind of stuff with Schwen, highlighting that, like, yeah, this is why he's doing it, is because he also has suffered a loss within his family. Yeah, you never asked the question, what about his father? What was the deal there? But to find out that, like, oh, he was kind of also, you know, into medicine. He went to the Herbalist Institute and was attacked. That's interesting. And again, the whole Taku connection there is, this is the herbalist and her cat Miyuki, of course, that's in Taku. And also Taku is referenced in the Yang Chen novels as well, as one of the Shang cities, I believe. So there's some cool details here. They don't really go into that specific kind of level of it. The significance in this era is just that there's a Herbalist Institute there. That's the main point. But I like a lot of the other setup of, like, you know, Jin and Schwen learning the Dai Li technique so that they do go undercover, but that they're also ready for a fight. So we're going to be setting up the idea that, oh, is Jin finally going to be able to, you know, like, fight here? Because again, the last time there was a kind of incident in the underground Dai Li base, she was kind of surprised at how quickly Smellerby and Schwen jumped into action, where she was left kind of standing there. Now it seems like she's going to be ready. But also, we are gradually building the romance between Jin and Schwen, which is going to come to a head quite shortly. So a lot of nice stuff here, even going back to, like, I think the previous chapter as well. I do like the moment of them kind of highlighting that, hey, here's the explanation on what happened to the other Judy kind of girls that we freed. So 4 of them are going to get back to their families, and 3 are going to stay with the Wen family, which I think it's just a nice thing to do, just to kind of wrap up that little arc. Again, a kind of little bit of a forgotten piece from that episode, Lake Laogai. Oh yeah, did we just leave them there? But they addressed that, you know, they got out, and I guess they're going to be okay in the aftermath of this. So that's cool. So yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on these 2 chapters. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.